American cuisine to me is a beautiful mess of cultures and ingredients that all came from all these different places and landed in certain regions. And the people from those cultures that landed in those places shared something with someone else. They shared it with a stranger. And then that stranger said, "Oh my God."
These are stories of outdoor adventure and expert advice from folks with calloused hands. I'm James Nash, and this is the Six Ranch Podcast. For those of you out there that are truck guys like me, I want to talk to you about one of our newest sponsors, Decked. If you don't know Decked, they make bomb-proof drawer systems to keep your gear organized and safely locked away in the back of your truck. Clothes, rifles, packs, kill kits can all get organized and at the ready so you don't get to your hunting spot and waste time trying to find stuff. We all know that guy. Don't be that guy. They also have a line of storage cases that fit perfectly in the drawers. We use them for organizing ammunition, knives, glassing equipment, extra clothing, and camping stuff. You can get a 2-drawer system for all dimensions of full-size truck beds, or a single drawer system that fits mid-size truck beds. And, maybe best of all, they're all made in the USA. So, get decked and get after it. Check them out at decked.com. Shipping is always free. So how's bear camp?
Oh, it's brilliant.
Yeah.
I mean, our bear camp is not like a typical bear camp, I don't think. We have wall tents on platforms.
Right.
And my kitchen tent is solely for dining and kitchen. I've got a 10-foot by 12-foot cutout that is all mine, and clients know do not cross the line.
Yeah.
But it creates that like nice open scenario where clients still get a chance to come in and ask questions.
Yeah.
And it's brilliant. But, we've got beds. So we have memory foam mattresses on twin beds and cowhide carpets and faux lighting and Starlink, and it's it's a retreat.
It's a 21st century bear camp.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it's so much fun because we're right there on the South Fork of the Salmon River. I get to spend most of my off time either helping carry bear baits up to the baits, finding new ways to bake over propane and in those little Coleman ovens, and then fly fishing right there while I got my kitchen tent and just go fly fish and catch cutthroats all day. It's brilliant. It's really an awesome experience. And then the food that we're doing is restaurant quality dining in the middle of the backcountry.
Yeah.
So it's taking things to a whole nother level, which is a lot of fun for me because it's finding a way to be creative. Sure, I have the amenities of like having the oven or I have a propane grill, but we also do a lot of smoking. So I smoke a whole brisket once a week, and we use wild apple trees from the apple orchard that was planted up there by the settlers that settled the area in the early, it must have been late 1800s. You can't beat it. And our clients are great.
Yeah.
I love the folks that come in. We have a lot of repeat customers. So you get to know the folks.
Yep.
And you get to know their history. You get to know their families. And it just becomes a really intimate setting.
It really is.
It's fantastic. You spend that much time with someone in the middle of nowhere, it really helps you to connect. And you wind up with a hunter that tags out early. And I call them the stragglers. Even though they're tagged out, they're still just straggling around camp. And you watch people that really, they don't know how to let go and just be in nature and be calm and still, because they'll walk circles around camp, or they'll sit and they'll skip rocks on the river, and they'll sit in a hammock and swing back and forth, and then inevitably they come back into the kitchen and we're just having this conversation about like, oh, why are you doing this? How are you doing that? Which helps me professionally, right? Because then it forces me to actually speak what I'm actually doing, and then forces my ego to get a little bit more creative with the fun that we're having as far as like baked goods and everything else. So yeah, it's a good time. Bear camp's wonderful.
Well, introduce yourself to the audience, Chef.
Yeah. So my name is Andrew Garrett. I am a chef. I am an Army tanker, which I think is how I really connected with you at first. Was Erica had told me, "Oh, you got to meet Adele and James at Six Ranch because grass-fed beef, and I love grass-fed beef." And James is a Marine, and I didn't realize that you were a tanker. And then when I realized you were a tanker, I'm like, "Oh, this guy, he gets it. He gets it."
Yeah, not even a dying breed. It's a dead breed now.
It is.
Yeah.
I just found that out. I was talking to a buddy of mine who's getting ready to retire at this point. Because I think my term of service is probably 10 years before you. I was 99 to 2003.
Okay.
And so I was just talking to him about, because I saw the SEP 3.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, wait a minute, you're giving the loader a sight? Like the loader gets to pick up targets? Where was that when I was in? Like that would be, that.
I didn't have that. I didn't have that.
No, you guys were on the M1A1s.
Yep.
Yeah. So were we. Did you guys do the just typical tank gunneries for training and certifications?
Yeah. Our tank tables were different from the Army's.
Okay.
It was just more involved, I guess. And tank gunnery for us took 40 days.
Dang.
And it was actually very interesting at Camp Lejeune because we had to ferry the tanks across an arm of salt water to get out to the tank gunnery place. So we had that amphibious aspect to it, which of course is very important for Marines. And it's sketchy, man. It's sketchy putting your tank on this, like ferry that doesn't look like it's big enough.
Right.
And it squats down in the water, and it's like, all right, here we go. And they motor you across, and you disembark, and it was really cool, but definitely a very involved process. My platoon was wonderful. They were extremely skilled tankers, and before we deployed, when we shot that tank gunnery, we had the highest gunnery score in the whole Marine Corps, and I'm so proud of those guys for how they commanded their tanks and shot and just managed their time. There's a lot of dramas that come up. There's hurricanes that roll in. There's deaths in the family. There's 40 days is a long time.
Yeah.
And it simulates, in a way, the type of stuff that happens when you're deployed. And you need to figure out how to work through all that because you can't go. Like, you're here, and you need to focus on the task at hand and compartmentalize the rest of the world. How's tank gunnery for you guys? I mean, I shot it at school because we go to school together.
Right. Well, we would do 30 days, and I was stationed in Vilseck, Germany, which Grafenwehr, Germany, where the training facility for tanks, all of our gunnery ranges are right there.
Mm-hmm.
So we were right in the backyard of where we at. So I was 3rd Brigade, 1st Infantry Division, and we were the ready force for the U.S. Army USRA. So we were just on this constant training cycle. If we weren't in Bosnia, Kosovo, Macedonia, we were in Graf, we were in Hohenfels, and we were shooting. And it was, even though the thing that was kind of crazy about that is we would be right there. Like, you could see our barracks from where we were sleeping on the range. And just like you're saying, all this life happens, and still, no, we're here for a purpose. This is our job right now. And you watch people like, oh my God, like, I don't know how to do it. And you really figure out who those people that are going to be there 100% are for you. I was really fortunate. I had absolutely brilliant leadership. I had my first tank commander was a green to gold, Lieutenant Jacobs, and he was no BSing. Let's get this job done. And, I think we shot 2 distinguished gunneries over 900 with that tank crew. And then I wound up being a 20-year-old gunner for another green to gold LT. Gotcha. And we shot another distinguished. We were very good at what we did.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where, like, tanking is so easy, but it's also so hard.
Yeah. It's easy when you've got a good crew and a full up system, And then as they start taking those components away from you, and pretty soon you're shooting manual gunnery and your headsets quit working. It's a lot of work.
Yeah,
It's a lot of work.
There's nothing like hydraulic fluid shooting you in the lap. And
Yeah, so much.
wait a minute, why am I warm?
Yeah.
Why is this happening?
And for folks that don't know, there's in the M1A1 Abrams main battle tank, there's 4 crew members. You've got a driver who's the junior guy, a loader who's the next most junior guy, and then you have the gunner and the tank commander. And the gunner is a very senior position in the tank. So being a gunner at age 20 is a big deal. It means you were promoted quickly, and I'm sure meritoriously. Then if you have the platoon commander or platoon leader, if you're in the Army, that individual is a second or first lieutenant, and they're going to be in charge of the tank platoon, being 4 tanks. And because their attention ends up getting split and talking to the other tank commanders and to their higher positions, to adjacent elements, to aircraft, etc., the gunner on that one tank, on the platoon leader, platoon commander's tank, has to be able to run that tank by himself. And that the fact that you're able to do that at such a young age speaks volumes.
Oh yeah, I absolutely love what we were doing. Like I said, my leadership was high speed. You know, we no BSing until training was done, and then the BSing was to be BS'd.
The Six Ranch podcast is brought to you by Nick's Handmade Boots, a family-owned company in Spokane, Washington. This year, Nick's is celebrating its 60th anniversary of making quality work boots for men and women in America. I recently visited their factory to see the boot making process from start to finish. As a rancher myself, it was a rewarding experience for me to see, feel, and smell the quality leathers processed in 100-year-old tanneries throughout America. This leather is cut, sewn, lasted, and sold by skilled craftsmen before ending up on the feet of folks ready for a day of honest work. I'm currently wearing my Nick's Boots Game Breakers on the Six Ranch as I work cattle, plant my garden, build fence, and prepare for the upcoming hunting season. Nick's has a full assortment of men's and women's work boots to serve wildland firefighters, ranchers, tradespeople, military personnel, and anyone else who values quality footwear made in America. Visit nicksboots.com today to find your next pair of quality American-made work boots. Add a pair of boots and a work belt to your cart and use the code 6RANCH, that's the number 6 and the word ranch, to receive the belt for free. Were you in Germany during 9/11?
Yep.
What was that like?
It was wild. So we were in the middle of training in Hohenfels, Germany. And I don't know if you've ever been a part of a training where somebody loses a piece of equipment like a 9mm or an M4 and everything stops and you start looking for it. Well, we were told immediate stop, everything's got to stop, pack everything up, wash everything down, get to the railhead. Or like, get to the railhead. And that to us was like, hey, we've still got 3 weeks left of this, training. And so get to doing everything. Hohenfels has this like super sticky, dark red clay that just sticks to every single bit of a tank.
Everywhere the tanks train has clay, I swear to God.
It's inevitable. And it's like they aren't designed for that, but that's where we train with them, right? And so, you have to get underneath it with these giant hoses, just power washing the heck out of these tanks, because the German Jägermeister will come over, and if you have any mud from that region going back to your home region, you're redlined and go back and start over.
Yeah. And I've seen people inspect the cleanliness of tanks with Q-tips.
Oh, it's nuts.
Yeah.
It's absolutely nuts. And if you don't have a squared away unit, you're just going to be in this perpetual cycle of no go. But yeah, we headed back down to Vilsec, and we were pulling in. They had taken 1st Battalion and put tanks at the front gate. And that's when all of our buzzers are going off like, okay, like what's really going on? Mm-hmm. Because we went from having essentially an open post when I got there where, any civilian could walk on, sign in, come on post. All of a sudden, we've got gates and we've got tanks to the front gate. And we made it back in time, and then we started watching the news, and everything's happening. And it was nuts because everything got real very quickly. We had been deployed to Macedonia, and so we'd been around deployments. We still had a couple Gulf War era NCOs in our unit, and so people had an idea. And because of the way we were training on a regular basis, we were training for this moment, and then it's real, and that was. It was crazy. I mean, there was no sleep. We were rotating 24-hour guard shifts at the gate. No one really knew what was going to happen. We had a lot of guys from New York State, New York City, who were, watching and trying to get a hold of family members. And at that point, it's 2001, so we're still working on landlines and, new cell phone technology. So trying to get through to anybody on, Skype wasn't a thing yet. FaceTime wasn't a thing. So it was a lot of confusion, a lot of panic, a lot of worry. And then once everything kind of settled down, just went into, okay, well, what's our next mission? And that's when we started kind of figuring out what the plan was really looking like as we move forward. But yeah, it was surreal. It was very surreal because even though you're training for all this, you're training to go to war. You're training to be in a battle. You're doing all this real live fire activity, but that moment becomes very real, and everything kind of slows down and takes a while to sink in, and like, okay, gather together and let's move on to the next mission.
And 10 years later, it was a very different experience because we'd been at war for a long time.
Right. So
it wasn't everyone going into the military pretty much knew, especially if they're a ground combat element. It wasn't, am I going to deploy? Am I going to war? It's like, am I going to get the chance? Very, very, very different situation. I have a lot of compassion for the guys who signed up in the 90s and then were in, when 9/11 happened, or for the guys that signed up right beforehand. That's a different beast. I have so much love and admiration for them, but also for the guys that stepped up to the line right afterwards. Some of those photographs of recruitment offices the next day, like, that warms my heart. Like, that's what America is all about. But America is also about guys like you who signed up during peacetime, and then all of a sudden it's like, you're up to bat, son.
Hey, guess what?
Yeah.
Here you go.
Yeah. You're getting put in. What is the most important lesson that you learned from the military that you apply to being a professional chef today?
Being 100% accountable for my own actions.
Yeah.
That was by far one of the top lessons that I was fortunate enough to learn, is regardless if it's a A+ effort or if it's I don't know where those rounds went, it's your responsibility to be accountable for it. And that accountability spreads to the troops below you, right? So I was a young corporal. I was put into a position of leadership early, and I had these soldiers below me, and the one time I did not allow myself to be 100% accountable, my team felt the wrath. And from that moment forward, I just mentally, I'm never going to not be 100% accountable for my actions because of the result that it's going to have on these guys. And these guys are going to see that leadership. They're going to see that example, and they're going to carry that on to the next generation. The same thing, and I think that's why the transition to the culinary arts was so easy for me, is I went from a battalion situation to a battalion kitchen, where you have this very clear set of ranks, or your executive chef, your chef de cuisine, your sous chef, your garde manger, your line cooks, your fish guy, your meat guy, your prep guy, your dish guy, and if any one of those elements doesn't respect you or doesn't trust you, you're not going to have a good time.
And that's called the French Brigade, right?
The French Brigade, battalion style cooking.
So get into that a little bit more, because these are terms that, a lot of people will never even go in a restaurant that has a French Brigade. So kind of break it down for everybody.
Yeah, so the French brigade is, like you said, pretty much done with as far as culinary arts go. There's still some restaurants that allow it to exist, but the French brigade essentially created an assignment for each position in the kitchen, starting with your executive chef, who oversaw, your ordering, your menus, your recipe development, and overall execution of the restaurant. Then you have your chef de cuisine, so your chef of the food. So he or she is in charge of the entire line. So something goes wrong, executive chef doesn't go to a line cook, and executive chef's going to come to the chef de cuisine and say, hey, okay, like, what's this? Mm-hmm. And then he reports. And then the sous chef is the under chef of the chef de cuisine, typically in charge of all your prep items, making sure that inventory is correct. They'll do a lot of produce ordering, make sure things are fresh. They spend a lot of time. It's the epitome of middle management is you are in charge of the lowest of lows and report to the highest of highs. And there is always...
So the sous chef is feeling heat from everybody.
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
No good days.
No. And most of the time they're working on the line. Your executive chef will be expediting. But in a French brigade, there will be an expediter position.
And what does expediting mean? That word has a bunch of different meanings, but a different one in this case.
Oh, in a restaurant situation, so everybody hears that ticket machine going off. The expediter is organizing those tickets and calling them out to your sous chef, who's on the other side. I've got 2 mid-well steaks, I've got 2 rare steaks, I've got 3 fish, 2 chicken, 1 pheasant, and they're all going to one table. So they all got to come together at one time and go out at that same time.
And these are things that take different amounts of time to cook.
Absolutely insane.
Yeah.
So that's why your sous chef is watching your line cooks like, hey, I need 3 beef down, 2 mid-well, 1 rare. Okay, well, great. I've got mid-well steak. I've got a rare steak. And then you got, hey, I need fish. Fish is going to take seconds. So you need your meat guy who's working a grill, working the meat, to talk to your fish guy, who also needs to talk to the salad guy, because we got salads coming up too, because you're coursed out. So the expediter is essentially gathering all these items from the sous chef, who's now orchestrated the preparation of these things to come to the middle, come to the window. Expediter is going to line those plates up and hand them to a food runner. An expediter is so important because if they lose control of their line and a food runner comes in and takes that fish that was going with the mid-well steaks to table 3, that's a solo fish, I'll just run this myself and be helpful. It's not helpful at all, because now we need a fish and we've got 2 mid-well steaks and a rare steak, so that rare steak is now dying. And those mid-wells are already dead anyway, so it doesn't really matter, but now we got to get that fish up in a hurry. Well, he's already got 2 other fish coming in because more tickets have already come in. And so that vocalization and be able to read the line, see, how many proteins are down, our veg down, our sauces up, are we all coming up at the same time, is a huge part. So the sous chef plays a huge role in that circus.
Yeah.
And then from there, you have different line positions. Depending on the size of the brigade, you'll have a fry person. You'll have garde-manger, who's essentially the garden manager, who will typically be salads and desserts, but oftentimes in a full brigade there will be pastry. And then you'll have a fish, you'll have protein, you'll have veg. And all those people have to communicate at the same time to make sure that a dish is executed correctly and a table is served in a timely, beautiful manner. And I've had the pleasure of working in 2 brigade kitchens, and it is absolute chaos and an absolute symphony all at the same time. And when it runs great, it is a beautiful thing to watch. And I don't think that that's something that television culinary arts really gives the audience an idea of, because it is such an intense scenario where everything just has to be perfect. And that ticker, that printer does not stop ticking. And, I remember being a young line cook and just having nightmares of hearing that and just wake up. Okay, I'm safe here.
I've heard that from a lot of chefs that have worked under those types of scenarios, that they have dreams where they're waking up like trying to cook something, all of a sudden it's late.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating. From a military perspective, it reminds me of kind of the type of communication that you end up having to do, especially as like as a tank platoon commander or maybe as a JTAC or something like that. I think JTAC is probably a little bit more close to that because this is a Joint Tactical Air Controller, I think is what JTAC stands for. That's what they're doing. So you've got somebody that is, on a radio, and they're talking to tanks and saying, all right, tanks, where you at? Where's your frontline position, frontline trace? How long until you're on target? You need to be on target at this specific minute. At the same time, they have jets that are inbound. They might have missiles that got fired out of, the Gulf of Oman that, are going to be 27 minutes in flight. And they've got helicopters that are on station, and they've got troops on the ground that are moving forward. And we need to combine this symphony of violence in a way that, we don't have missiles running into jets that are running into helicopters that are shooting tanks that are running over the top of troops. And while you're doing all that, you've got, an oppositional force that's doing their best to try to, kill you and prevent you from accomplishing your mission. And I see similarities between, trying to serve up a 5-top of, dishes that take different amounts of time and like trying to conduct an assault on a position. Yeah.
I am going to use that. The customer is the enemy. They are trying to defeat us right now. Every time they want that fish well done. Every time they want that steak well done. Yeah. Okay. I see your game. No, I like that. That is a perfect analogy for what it is.
Interesting. So then you go from a world like that where you have, so many people who are dedicated to all those different tasks to something that's very much different, like working, in the backcountry where you have to do all of those things by yourself. And just the logistics of backcountry cooking are very interesting because there's still an expectation of fresh food, but there is no immediate resupply, right? What does it take to get to the camp where you are working at?
So for our bear camp, which is right there on the South Fork, we're in Payette National Forest in Idaho. We are 4.5 hours to pavement. And then an hour and a half to McCall, Idaho, which is the local town there. So everything we pack in there, even though we have relatively quick access, we're not going out because there's no point in wasting the resources, fuel, time, and energy to get out and replace something. So we have to be very specific. I'm a big checklist guy. I love checklists. I like having all of my menus dialed in for the week. I know exactly what we need, how much of it, and we check and double check, and we miss stuff.
Yeah.
The last week we had everything on the list except for eggs. The 5 dozen eggs that I always get, and there was on my list.
And that's a staple.
It is. They're in everything. Everything I do is eggs. So, I'm like, okay, well, I've got a dozen eggs left, but we called in a favor and we put 5 dozen eggs on one of the planes. So our clients fly in to a little bush airstrip.
Yep.
And so
McCall Aviation.
Yeah, actually Sawtooth.
Okay.
Yeah, Sawtooth flies for us. If you're into the history of backcountry flying in the Frank Church Wilderness, Sawtooth, Mike is the owner and one of the lead pilots, and he is any aviation book you pick up around that area, Mike is in it in some way or another. He still runs mail up to Yellow Pine, out to Warren, and just a phenomenal history of how folks got things in and out of there. But they hooked us up. They did us a solid.
Super Cubs and jet boats.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's awesome. I wish jet boats could get up the South Fork.
Yeah.
Because I think it'd be a trip to see them. But our fall camp is in the Frank Church Wilderness. So we are a mule pack 3.5 hour ride from the trailhead.
Gotcha.
And you forget something. You forget something.
No airstrip on that one.
No. Oh, well, we fly into Big Creek.
Okay.
Which is right there, and then we drive up about an hour and a half to the trailhead, and take the mules in from there.
Gotcha.
Up on top of Mosquito Ridge. And I tell you what, that is unlike any country I've ever been in.
Yeah.
It's spectacular.
Yeah. It's always been, a challenge and sort of a rite of passage for mule packers to be able to pack eggs. Eggs are notoriously fragile, and a lot can go wrong when you're packing stuff on a mule, and you have to have stuff cinched down tight. So, it's something that people would say is like, oh, he'll bring you 5 dozen eggs, and not one of them will be cracked. It's like, I don't know if I could pull that off getting from the grocery store to here. But yeah, I've definitely packed eggs successfully and unsuccessfully before on mules in my younger day. But yeah, it's a fascinating world. So you're good with your logistics. You run a lot of checklists. You've got a lot of self-accountability. But when things go wrong, you've got to get creative in a hurry, right? So, I've been on whitewater trips where the gear boat, spends some upside down time. And then a lot of your dry ingredients are no longer dry, but you've got a menu, you had a plan. It's like, oh, well, that plan's gone. What can we make with what we have? And there's still that same expectation of quality, creativity, plating, all that. It's a challenge.
Oh, yeah, especially if clients have seen what you're capable of in that first day, and then things go awry, because then you've set this expectation, right? Because now the bar is high. And I don't know if you're like me, and, I am ego-driven. So every time someone says, oh, wow, a little bell goes off in my brain, and I get really excited, and I'm really happy, and I want to feed that. And so, yeah, when something is missing or you've got to recreate, it's challenging, but it's possible as long as you stay calm. I think at the end of the day, that's the trick to solving any problem in a hurry is take a breath, calm down. Okay, let's fix this.
Yeah.
My big project lately has been cinnamon rolls. Okay. I've been trying to make the perfect backcountry cinnamon roll.
Let's talk through it. And let's get involved.
It is it's a challenge because, my first attempt was last fall. And so we have wood-fired stoves in the tents. But there's nowhere to really proof anything. Mm-hmm. And when the temperature's, 40 degrees in the morning and 50 degrees at night, there's no way to really do it. And you can't put yeast directly on top of a wood-fired stove because it's going to burn it, it's going to overcook it, and you're going to wind up with a hot spot and it breaks down. So I had to figure out, just double boil it, right? So heavy bottom pot, water, and double boil it. And once we started doing that, then we started seeing okay, these are really expanding. Mm-hmm. And my experience with yeast stoves at that time was very limited. It's okay, yeah, you let pizza dough rise. You push it out, you roll it, you toss it, put it in the oven, you're done. Well, I didn't realize that there's a point that the yeast stops eating and it deflates. And if you have a yeast dough that deflates, you have a rock hard roll. You don't have the fluffy deliciousness. And so it became this delicate balance of, okay, how am I going to manage my time to get these just right, roll them, second proof, okay, great, then roll them in the dough, let them proof, put them in the oven. And I made the mistake this last spring of letting cinnamon rolls. I was so excited. I was bragging to the clients, oh my gosh, look at this proof. Look how big they are. They're so fluffy. I let them sit out overnight. Well, overnight, temperature drops below 40. It's like a helium balloon that you just pop the air out of and everything deflates. We came into the kitchen in the morning. I'm getting coffee going. I'm really excited about these cinnamon rolls, and I look and oh no, these are very flat. So I quickly just recirculated through, and it's a delicate balance because that yeast, I found that there's a very specific time frame between 105 degrees and 125 degrees of your milk, sugar, and yeast being in that just absolute perfect moment to put it in the dough and then really, fold it over. But what I found was that really whipping the heck out of that milk, yeast, and sugar combination, really putting some good air in it, made a huge difference in the first, second, and third proofing. So the first proof, beautiful, pat it down, knead it, roll it out. Second proof, awesome, roll it out, cut it into rolls. Third proof, just these big, beautiful, fluffy cinnamon rolls, and bake them right then. Don't let those cinnamon rolls, I was really tempting fate. Like, okay, 5 more minutes. Let them go for 5 more minutes. They'll get bigger. They'll get bigger. You get really excited about it. And then finally I was like, no, you just got to go straight in. And that was the trick, is that really frothing the heck out of that yeast mixture, a nice fold, and then that third proof. And we made some cinnamon rolls this week that would give IKEA a run for their money.
Nice.
Yeah, it was phenomenal.
IKEA makes cinnamon rolls?
Oh, you've never had an IKEA cinnamon roll?
I've never been to an IKEA.
Oh, man. Well, when you go to IKEA, I pray you don't have to.
I thought they just made furniture.
No. Oh, no. The Swedes are known for 2 things, furniture and food, right?
Not really. Like, Scandinavian food is trash. Okay, all right. I mean, I like crepes, There's some Scandinavian stuff, but generally speaking, like when I lived in Norway, I was not impressed by the food.
Oh, that's
scene.
right.
Yeah.
You've been there.
Yeah, I lived there for a year. I went there skinny because I was wrestling competitively. I wrestled for Norway, and man, I continued to lose weight. It's like there's no red meat here. Like, I ate more whale than I did beef in a year. It's crazy. Okay, IKEA makes cinnamon rolls. Here we go.
Yeah, they make cinnamon rolls and meatballs. They're more notoriously known for their meatballs. The good news is, if you get close enough to an IKEA, you can DoorDash them.
No kidding.
Oh, you could DoorDash IKEA meatballs.
I've never DoorDashed anything either. But these are things we don't have out here,
Well, you look around, you get things like mountains, and I guess those are cool to look at. Yeah, that's one thing I love about this drive-in, right? So, my original intention was come from the north and come back down, because I hadn't been through that real portion of Hell's Canyon and come down. But one of our guides needed to get back home relatively quick in a hurry, and he was flying out of Boise, so I did the usual. But there is something, I don't think people realize what an awesome drive that is. Like, you hit Elgin, and all of a sudden you're cruising through, running through the rivers right there, and then you come into this beautiful, just what seems like an endless meadow, and the mountains are just right there, and it's almost like they just frame the sky.
Yeah,
it's one of the more beautiful drives that I get to make.
It's a special place, and it's gorgeous coming in from any direction, from the north especially. You come up out of the canyon and get into those valleys, and then suddenly those mountains are right in front of you, and it's like, wow, this is awesome. And it is beautiful here. It really is. But we're so blessed in America to have beauty all over it. Yeah, pretty incredible. I was doing a little bit of research today on the Big Island of Hawaii, and there's considered to be 14 climate zones in the world. The Big Island has 10 of them.
Really?
Right? So they've got alpine, they've got rainforest, they have arid desert, the list goes on. But one of the most diverse landscapes in a small area anywhere in the world.
Wild.
Yeah.
I did not know that about Big Island.
It's also the largest mountain in the world, which I think some people know, some people don't. But if measured from the seafloor, it's 33,000 feet tall.
That's insane. And that's Kilauea, right? Or is that?
So Kilauea, there's 5 volcanoes on the island.
Okay.
That are active, and I think that the peak is actually an inactive volcano, and I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. But yeah, pretty amazing place America is, and yeah, I mean there's amazing places all over the world too, but this one's ours.
Yeah, we are extremely fortunate. Yeah, it's one of my favorite questions is when people ask, well, what's American cuisine?
It's a good question.
Yeah, it is. It's a great one.
Yeah, and you have to break it down into regions.
I could see that. In your opinion.
Yeah, in my opinion,
what is American cuisine to you? So regionally?
Yeah, I would break it down further into regions. So even if you take a category like pizza, That's very regionally specific. And, you're going to have a New York style pizza and a Chicago style pizza and a Detroit style pizza. And, it's going to go on and on. If you shift over to barbecue, there's 2 different barbecue regions in North Carolina, right? And you want to talk about Civil War. They both think they're right, whether you're in Eastern or Western North Carolina. It's either, vinegar and red pepper flakes, or it's like a mustard-based sauce. Very, very different. There's 2 different barbecue styles in Tennessee, like wildly different from Memphis to Nashville. And, then you've got Texas, you've got Kansas City, you get up into the Northwest, and we've modified almost all those with our own, smoking traditions that come from salmon and from smoking seafood. And you get another totally different style that lended itself so well to tri-tip that became one of the most popular cuts of meat in the country. When if you go back 20 years and ask somebody in Texas or Nebraska or Virginia for a tri-tip, they wouldn't know what you're talking about. Yeah.
No, I love that. I totally agree with you. The region to region, because it is so specific to each place.
Yeah. But what's American cuisine to you?
American cuisine to me is a beautiful mess of cultures and ingredients that all came from all these different places and landed in certain regions. And the people from those cultures that landed in those places shared something with someone else. They shared it with a stranger. And then that stranger said, "Oh my God." I know you've been down to New Orleans, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
It's my favorite example of what American cuisine really is, because these are folks that came and shared food. Because to me, food is the final place that we really can communicate across the board without, anything else. We have a common understanding. Food is that bridge. And American cuisine is this beautiful mashup of different cultures coming together to try to find that middle ground and share something together. And then saying, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to take that and I'm going to go over here back to where I came from, and I'm going to share it with the people that I know." And then someone there took it to the next place and they shared it with someone else. And then, it's slowly spread, but there's the very heartlands of where these cuisines started. Creole cuisine, it's good when you go other places, but it's not the same as when you're in Creole country.
Absolute facts. And, New Orleans is almost a perfect example of that, because you have the French Cajuns who are 2-time expats, right? Like they moved from France to Canada, and then they moved from Canada down to this little swamp that they thought they could get left alone. And then you blend that with, with like the Atlantic Islander, Caribbean, Voodoo, Creole, African influence, and you put it in a pot with some fat for 12 hours, and what comes out of it is gorgeous food. Mm-hmm. For whatever reason, and this is mind blowing to my friends and especially to my sister, but I don't like spicy food. I sweat like crazy. If the ketchup hits wrong, it's embarrassing for everybody around me. But the food in New Orleans doesn't do it to me. So I think binding that heat with fat rather than with acid makes all the difference. But I loved it. And it was the first time in my life that I got to enjoy spicy food. I was like 37 years old. I'm like, this is awesome. Yeah, I loved it. Yeah, and the food is a reflection of the people and a place, and then it gets changed a little bit by the ingredients that are available in that area and by the climate in that area. I had a cool experience a couple weeks ago. I was at a dive school that was based in Oregon City, but for the open water portion of it, we drove up into the Olympic Peninsula and we dove in the Hood Canal. And I'd never been up there before. Gorgeous. On my way in, I'm driving in the morning. I'm just like mentally preparing myself for these dives and for everything I have to do to pass the class. And I saw a sign for a river, and I read it in my subconscious, but I kept on driving past it. And then we suited up and went to get in the water, and I splashed water over my face because that helps my mask seal a little bit better. And I tasted some of the water, and I was like, wait, I've tasted this before. This tastes like Hama Hama oysters. And then I remembered I just crossed the Hama Hama River, and it had probably been 2 years since the local seafood importer here, Pier 303, had Hama Hama oysters. And I'd bought some and eaten them. They're sweet and salty and delicious and just really, really good oysters. But that connection of taste from that water to those oysters, 2 years earlier, it happened in an instant. And that's something that's really powerful about food is the way that it can transport us through our own memories.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's food is an amazing part of every culture in the world, and I think every single place that an ingredient comes from has a very specific taste. And I think that that's one of the things that kind of separates it as things get further and further away from their core, is that memory.
Yeah.
But one of my favorite culinary movies of all times is Ratatouille.
Okay.
Love that movie. The greatest scene of any culinary film is watching that critic eat the ratatouille and have that flashback.
Oh.
Right? Because it takes him to that place. It takes him to that moment where his mom is making this ratatouille. It's something that was this labor of love that he had, and it takes him back to that moment. And all of a sudden, his grimace melts, and he's this childish, persona returns, and he's just at ease and calm. And I think that's what food does. The way food is raised, I don't think as a whole, we've really lost contact with how our ingredients get to our table. We're getting into a generation now where kids think that meat comes from the supermarket, and that to me is frightening, right? Because I'm fortunate enough to, on my way up here, stop in and get a whole bunch of great grass-fed cattle from places I can see them
from
walking.
The pasture that's 10 yards away from the studio right now.
And that is a flavor that is irreplaceable. It's not repeatable. That's not something you're going to find in the middle of I-5 at a cattle compound.
Yeah.
That's not the experience that these cattle have had, and that's not the experience that I'm going to have when I eat that cattle. This is going to be something that is, the time and effort that's been put into tilling the ground to make sure that this is the right kind of feed so that these cattle can actually eat healthy. So they live this really healthy life cycle. They're well cared for when they go to the kill. They're well cared for when they go to the butcher and the wrap. And then when I get them, I'm going to make sure that I take care of them when I cook them. And there's something that exists in that moment that we're slowly losing in America. I really think, and I really fear that, because I think that's kind of the downfall of our culture as a whole, is losing connection to where our food really comes from.
We have to fight tooth and nail, and still have not won this, just to get the country of origin on the label of beef. And there are beef producers in the United States that resist that on the national level. So not even just like, I would love it if there's a barcode on the package that you could, or a QR code, and you could scan that and you could tell what ranch that animal came from. I think that would be great. But we can't even get it so that it's mandated to say whether that beef is from America or from some other country.
Well, the majority of our beef it's coming from other places, and it's coming in freight containers, and it's getting repackaged and relabeled and put on the shelves.
And I also want to make clear that I think that that's okay too, right? But I want people to be able to tell if they're buying American beef or Brazilian beef. That's all. I think that's fair.
Brazilian beef is good. There is some phenomenal Brazilian beef.
Yeah.
That is true.
They're good at cooking meat.
They really are.
Yeah. And they consume a lot of it. I think Brazil and Argentina are the largest consumers of beef per person in the world.
Really?
Argentina's over 200 pounds per person per year.
Wow.
And I think America is like 70-something.
Crazy.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah. And I don't know. Seems to be treating them pretty well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one of my favorite condiments to make to accompany beef is a chimichurri.
Oh, yeah, so good.
And, again, speaking, regionally one area to another, chimichurri is just that way. So I prefer a red chimichurri, and most folks are used to seeing like a green chimichurri.
Mm-hmm.
My red chimichurri is marjoram, fresh, oregano, fresh garlic, smoked paprika, a little bit of cayenne, olive oil, and sherry vinegar, and then freshly cut parsley. And that to me is chimichurri over the top of a grilled ribeye, New York strip, just money.
And it brightens it up. Oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, chimichurri is awesome.
It's so good. And I think that it's an underutilized condiment. So anybody listening, make chimichurri. Find a recipe. Do it.
Yeah, and it's not that hard.
No, it's really easy. You'll thank us later.
It's not that hard. Yeah, and man, fresh garlic, like we're glossing over that. If you're actually getting fresh garlic, like that was previously in a bulb, your chef loves you, because it's a pain. I don't care how many tricks you see on TikTok. It's a pain.
No, you got to put them between the two metal bowls and you shake it real hard and they all come off. It's magic.
Yeah, it just works like that perfectly every time.
Yeah.
No.
Or you get the Chinese finger trap tool. Have you seen that one? It's silicone. It looks like a Chinese finger trap.
No.
And you put the garlic clove in there and you're supposed to roll it.
Okay.
And so you do each clove individually, one at a time.
That's a lot of work.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's another good one. What's your trick to peeling garlic? Do you have a time saver for peeling garlic?
A lot of smashing.
Yeah.
A lot of smashing. Yep. And what did I just make the other day? Oh, I brought back some of those oysters after the dive school, and I wanted to. We ate a bunch of raw oysters the first night, and then the second night I wanted to grill the rest of them. So I threw them on the Traeger at 500 degrees, and then as soon as they popped open, I had taken some a 3-cheese hard cheese mix like Parmesan and whatever else, and I had a bunch of smashed up horseradish and fresh garlic in there, and I'd done that all in a mortar and pestle, just kind of made this paste, and then I just put that in each of them, and then closed the lid until it melted, and they were fantastic. I don't know if that's a recipe. I don't know if I was trying to imitate something, but they tasted so good.
It's similar to oysters Rockefeller.
Yeah.
Instead of going into a broiler or a salamander, you're just closing the heat.
Yeah.
So you can eat horseradish. Horseradish doesn't get you.
Horseradish, wasabi, those things come in peace, and they're like, haha, I'm here. All right, I'm gone.
Yeah.
Moving on with our lives.
Yeah. It's one of those things. I think people get the burn, the spicy burn of like a pepper, the capsaicin in those, confused with the nasally spiciness of horseradish or wasabi.
Yeah.
And I take it sounds like you were using fresh horseradish, which again, if you like horseradish, buy a root. It lasts. You take care of it, it'll last. And you just grate off what you need, and it is so good.
I want to try and grow some too. I think it'll grow here.
Yeah. I've never grown horseradish. It's
I haven't either.
I imagine because it's just a tuber, right? And y'all do pretty well with potatoes over here.
Dude, I have potato trees growing out here right now. The first potatoes we planted I've mounted them 3 times already. I'm out of dirt to mount them any taller, and they've come up like 2 feet beyond that. They've got these big coarse stalks. I think I'm going to be potato rich this fall.
Fantastic.
The potatoes are doing well.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
There was a potato shortage last year. It was a tough year on potatoes.
I was just talking with a friend about this yesterday. Did you know that up until the early 1900s that the potato was an entree? It was the main course.
Really?
That's why the Irish potato famine was such a big deal. They didn't lose a side. They lost the star of the show.
It was the entree. Envisioning a potato as an entree. I've seen baked potatoes with bacon and sour cream and cheese and green onions and caramelized onions and crispy onions served as like a appetizer or shared.
Yeah.
I could imagine that as an entree, especially if you think about the early 1900s and what portion sizes were then versus what the assumed portion size is now.
And we're not necessarily trying to elevate food. I'm not talking about restaurants here. I'm talking about
just a straight up entree.
So like that was the star of the meal was
wild.
this big, calorie dense, fiber rich, had all the vitamins. Yeah, that was the star of the show.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I like that.
And then along came meat. I'm taking over.
Sorry, potato.
Yeah.
I met someone new. It's not you. It's not you. It's beef. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You're wonderful. I love that you're great, but beef.
Yeah. Meat was and continues to be a luxury. And I think humans have such an interesting history with meat. We used knives for a couple million years before we used fire, right? And the knife was about meat, about trying to get that stuff cut off of an animal so that we could escape with it before other scavengers and predators showed up. And those early humans spent a huge amount of their day chewing, and just chewing and chewing and chewing, and that's why their facial structures were so different from ours today. There's a lot of research that says that the reason that people have tooth problems today and that we have to have our wisdom teeth removed is because we eat soft foods. So we don't have to use the bones in our face as much. So we have more teeth and we have space for it because, it doesn't broaden out as it would if you were chewing on, hides to make leather and chewing on meat that was cooked very well done because you're concerned about parasites and things like that. We're always trending towards stuff that's tender. That's one of the most important things about a steak, a quality of steak to people, is how tender it is. Whereas from a health perspective, we should be chewing on rubber.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And it makes in my mind, it makes total sense. I can't personally imagine a well done steak and chewing it that long.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely less pleasant, right?
Right.
For sure. And we figured it out. We'd go and get our wisdom teeth yarded out and party on. But it's very fascinating. When we did start using fire and we didn't have to spend as much time chewing, that's when brains started getting really big, and we're able to consume a lot more of that protein. But these times, late 1800s, early 1900s, industrial revolution type stuff, we really got into a place where meat was hard to come by in cities, and then if you're in a rural area, you had to spend your time farming because you needed that food insurance, which meant that maybe you were trying to raise some hogs or something like that for meat, but your cow was probably a milk cow. You weren't running herds of cattle. And then you had, hunters who were still nomadic, because if you live in one place and you hunt for very long, especially commercially, there's nothing left. Yeah. It's interesting times for wildlife, because coming out of that commercial hunting time period, we'd really shot a lot of stuff, white-tailed deer were almost gone. Mule deer were almost gone. Elk, were gone from large areas. Moose, bighorn sheep, turkeys. So the stuff that we hunt today are all comeback stories. But now they're on hard times again, just because, we're reintroducing predators during a time where they've lost a lot of habitat and things aren't the same.
Yeah, it's definitely. I had not thought about wildlife in a comeback story sense, even though I've looked at the history of how elk got to places like the Frank Church Wilderness.
Yeah.
I understand that they weren't really there, and they had been hunted out of these other plains regions, and they started taking these elk from Yellowstone and pushing them out. And even Pennsylvania is a fun example of what elk populations are doing.
Yeah, Pennsylvania, Michigan, North Carolina, even
Kentucky.
Yeah. I think there's a good chance the next world record bull comes out of Kentucky.
Oh yeah, I've seen some pictures of the elk that they have down there, and
they're making monsters down there in Harlan County.
It's spectacular.
Those coal country bulls are getting big, son.
They're so cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, working in the Frank Church, I've seen the impact of what introduction of predators like wolves to that area has done to the elk populations. Because I talk to, the folks that live in places like Yellow Pine and Warren who tell these stories. They got their pictures on the wall from, just 20, 30 years ago, these just absolutely monster trophy elk. And, you start to see these harsh winters and compile that with shrinking environment. And then, you put an apex predator in there, and these animals just don't stand a chance. The mule deer that we see up there are slowly disappearing. And, mule deer are one of the coolest animals, in my opinion. They live in the craziest of places. They'll go all over. They'll find a way to survive and live, but they're just getting pressured and pushed higher and higher into these places that they just, even though they are a survivor, they just can't live.
Well, we talked about it this spring a little bit, but what advice do you have for people who want to go out and say they're going to go on a rafting trip, or they're going to go, say they're overlanding, they're going to go do some car camping, someplace where they've got enough infrastructure where they can bring, a few cooking surfaces maybe. What advice do you have to them for like how to build a menu?
Oh, that's a great question. For folks that are looking to get out, be on the side of a river, camping out of the car, getting on a boat, the first thing to do is to make a plan, right? Is know what your plan is and pack it, and find ways to, if you can do something. One of my favorite things to do is to braise meat at home, vacuum seal it, and pack it so I can heat it ready to go with like tortillas, and then chop up some fresh pico de gallo, some avocados, something that's simple to carry, so you're not carrying like a whole chunk of a roast out there with you, and then making fresh tacos right there. Figuring out what your equipment is, right, is the most impactful pieces of equipment for me. Is a single propane burner. If you have the room to take two. One of those Coleman stoves that has the dual burner, they're perfect. What I found recently is a Coleman oven. Is there a collapsible oven? They fold up, oven out, they sit right on top of a burner, and you can bake like crazy. And, that for me was a total game changer, especially when it comes to like space that's limited, and the ability to, you can bake brownies, you can bake cookies, you can make cinnamon rolls, you could roast anything, and that's a fantastic tool to have. But really, it's just figuring out what your menu is the key part, and then putting together an equipment list that's not going to weigh you down. And be mindful of your resources. That's one of the things I think a lot of overland campers kind of miss, is they take for granted how much propane a propane burner uses, or how much coal they really need to like get a Dutch oven hot, and they just throw it all in there, or they burn all their fuel, and all of a sudden they're really stressing to manage that fuel load, because that's one of the things, if you're carrying propane, that can get real heavy real quick.
Yeah, and charcoal takes up a lot of weight and space.
So much.
If you're going to be, like, if I'm going to do like 4 meals in Dutch ovens and like 3 meals in a little charcoal grill, I'm probably going to need to bring like 50 or 60 pounds of charcoal. That takes up a huge amount of space. Yeah.
It's a ton. It's one of those things that's just easily mismanaged.
Yeah.
And it's, trial and error. Until you're really, really good at it, you don't know exactly how much you need.
And in some places, you can make your own coals. You can burn stuff down, but you kind of want a harder wood for that type of deal. You're not necessarily going to have a good time if you're burning conifers. And then you've also got, the fire risk, and some places don't want you to pick up sticks to burn and all that jazz. I also really like ingredients that I can use for multiple food items.
Mm-hmm.
Try to find multiple jobs for everything that you're going to bring. So something that I've used a little bit actually is AI to help develop menus. So go to ChatGPT, and you can put in your cooking surfaces, a bunch of ingredients that you're planning on bringing in, and say, hey, generate me 6 meals based on these ingredients. And Like that's an easy button for sure. Like we need to get smart and make the most of our time. Use the tools that are available.
It's crazy what ChatGPT, all those AIs, what they're capable of doing. It's kind of fun to play with. I typed in I asked it, what's the ideal menu for bear camp?
Yeah.
It came back with just, bear stew, bear sausage, and like all these different bear items, and then you refine it from there. You're like, well, not bear, but we're hunting bear, and then it refines it from there. It's a really cool tool to utilize.
Yeah.
And that's something that, again, just in my brain when I say like, oh, we got to plan a menu. That's part of the menu planning that I forget to verbalize, right? Because restaurants, in every restaurant you go to, if you look at a restaurant's breakfast menu, their brunch, lunch, dinner menus, a good restaurant is going to have, cross-utilization across the board, because you don't want to chop something 3 different times, 3 different ingredients, swap them out from shift to shift. You want to keep it completely seamless. So, one person comes in, they might swap out diced tomatoes for whole roasted tomatoes, something of that nature.
I also don't want to use a million cutting boards.
Oh, no.
Dude, drives me crazy. And I bring the little plastic sheet cutting boards so they don't take up a lot of space. But if you've got 29 things that you need to chop up, it's like, oh my goodness, I'm stopping to do dishes 4 times in the middle of this thing, and I haven't even turned a burner on yet.
That's one of the things. By the last week of bear camp, I'm so tired of doing dishes. I'm just like, I don't want to see another dish. I just get rid of them. I'm done. I'm tired. I'm tired of them. But that's one of those things. You're contaminating a cutting board, and that's one of those things. If you don't manage your prep right, you wind up cutting something like raw chicken on there, and you've got to go through the whole process. I'm a hot water guy. I like hot water to clean things. That's just my own germaphobe in me. Is I have to have hot water, like burn my hands hot, and that means I have to heat up all that water just to wash that cutting board, just to go back to chop something to wash it again. And no, it's miserable.
Where can people follow along in your chefing adventures?
I mostly exist on Instagram at Chef Garrett. I also have a website, chefandrewgarrett.com. And those are the 2 places. I'm not really active on the rest of the social medias.
And if they're not going to bear camp, are you working any place this summer?
Yeah, so I work as a personal chef.
Okay.
I am a gun for hire. I love to get emails from folks that have an event idea that some other chefs said, no, I can't really do that. I love people telling me, I don't think you can do that. That's I thrive in those situations where it's like, cool, let's figure out what this problem is. Let's create a solution, and let's kick its ass and make something fun.
Nice.
I like it when people do have crazy ideas that we get to execute. That's the fun stuff.
Cool. So if folks want to hire you, reach out through the website or through Instagram?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sick. All right, man. Well, thank you so much for your service to our country. Thanks for the wonderful discussion about food. I think it's pretty fun to talk about food and warfare and hunting, all in the same context. I like that.
Oh, it's brilliant. Thank you. An absolute pleasure to be here, and it's excited to see what y'all come up with in the future and moving forward, and look forward to our next collaboration. Do some cooking and eating.
Absolutely.
Heck
all right, brother. Bye, everybody.
I just want to take a second and thank everyone who's written a review, who has sent mail, who's sent emails, who's sent messages. Your support is incredible. And I also love running into you at trade shows and events and just out on the hillside when we're hunting. I think that that's fantastic. I hope you guys keep adventuring as hard and as often as you can. Art for the Six Ranch podcast was created by John Chatelain and was digitized by Celia Harlander. Original music was written and performed by Justin Hay, and the Six Ranch podcast is now produced by Six Ranch Media. Thank you all so much for your continued support of the show, and I look forward to next week when we can bring you a brand new episode.